Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
If Britain had a Legion of Honour, like France, our first guest would be in the front ranks of it. Instead, we've had to make him a lord, which is a pretty poor substitute, I can tell you.
He has literally risen from homelessness in the streets to being the Baron Bird of Notting Hill. In between, he founded The Big Issue, which has just published its 1,235th issue, selling 250 million copies over 25 years.
He speaks out with no fear or favour on all kinds of issues, but homelessness and poverty remains his #1 concern. He is Lord John Bird, MBE. Lord Bird, thanks for joining us on the Sputnik. I could speak to you all day, but we've only got 11 and a half minutes. So you learned to read and write in a boys' prison. You were homeless several times. You were brought up by nuns, and you ended up in the House of Lords. It's quite a Christmas story, actually, but what are the main morals you draw from that story?
Well, I think the interesting thing for me is that I did everything conceivably wrong, and my parents did everything conceivably wrong, but occasionally I would run into people who helped to change my life. The fact that I was a Catholic, the fact that I believed in Jesus, was a great saviour, the fact that I became a Marxist in my early 20s, and I got rid of all my anti-Semitism and racism, which I'd inherited from my London Irish background. The fact that I was always a strong believer in the fact that human beings could do better, because I was gradually morphing my way out of the underclass, the criminal classes. And as I was going along, I was meeting people who were worth knowing. And so I'm really a person who owes it all to luck. In fact, my autobiography, I wanted to call it I Bonaparte. This was for Penguin, because I have delusions of grandeur, and I still do. But they wouldn't let me do it in case a Bonapartist got the book wrong and, and all that stuff. So I called it Some Luck. And I've had incredible luck. I mean, you imagine, at the age of 20...
Well, you call it luck. I call it divine intervention myself.
Yeah, well, divine intervention, which is sometimes called luck. When I was 21, I was hiding from the old Bill in Edinburgh, and I met this ugly, big-nosed Scotsman called Gordon Roddick, him and I nearly had a fight because I had a nose like that and he had a nose like that. And we became mates, and then I didn't see him for 20 years, and he'd morphed into a multi-millionaire. He'd become the founder of the Body Shop with his wife, Anita Roddick. And I thought, I blessed myself. I thought, God, I've got to go and see him. And we became mates again. He was in New York in 1990, met some guy selling a street paper, and the guy... so Gordon said to him, why are you selling it? He says, well, I make money. I come from Brownsville. You don't get out of there unless you know where Tyson comes from. I've been in and out of the penitentiary system for most of my life. I now want to get out of that. I want to see my children. So he was selling the street paper called Street News, which was brilliant. Gordon comes back to the UK, tries to get the homeless organisations to create a street paper. But the problem with them the fact that they were already doing that and robbing your granny to do it never occurred to them. So eventually he asked me to do it as an ex-offender and a rough sleeper, as a beggar, one of Britain's best beggars. I could win a prize for that. And all this sorts of stuff. So that's luck. Or divine intervention. That is brilliant, making the most of my big broken nose, his big broken nose, and us becoming inseparable friends. And me, because my mother had me begging for money as a child on Portobello Road to get money for her cigarettes, I never had any problem of asking people for money. I'm great. If I meet some... there's no way I'd be sleeping in the streets now, because I'd be pouncing off somebody and getting some money. And I was really determined to get a big chunk of this guy's money to create the big issue and to make it work for the most disenfranchised people operating in Britain.
Now, you're a baron, and you're sitting amongst all these other barons. Traditionally, of course, these people became barons by cutting other people's throats and stealing off them. Do you feel that you're actually one of the few noble people in that institution?
Well, you see, in defence, I couldn't offer any defence for the House of Commons. I couldn't. But I can offer defence for the House of Lords, because in spite of the fact that there are some people, time servers and all, who had started in engineering and worked as he became the professor of engineering at Cambridge University. Another person was a nurse who come from a council flat, who became a head nurse, who ended up running a health school in the West End, in the west of the country. I came in with people who, like me, as a crossbencher, not appointed by any political party, who came in as experts, because the problem is the government sends this legislation. It's like a barge. They send it from one part of the Palace of Westminster, and they send you a leaky barge, and it arrives there, and you're supposed to jump on it, give it an MOT, do this, that, and the other, and you look at it, and you realise how appalling most government legislation is. Why? Because my fellow lords who are active look at it and say, well, this doesn't work, and then we send it back, we modernise it sometimes, we make it work. But the real thing is that there are expertise in the House of Lords. You don't get that in the beauty show, you know, the kind of X Factor place in the
Well, once upon a time you did. There's not much expertise there now, I'll grant you. I want to ask you about what now for the big issue and what now for the other causes that you're involved in.
Well, you see, the other thing, I get into the House of Lords and I realise that 70% of our activity is about what's gone wrong with regard to poverty intervention, what's gone wrong with government policies, what's gone wrong with charities, what's gone wrong with individuals putting money here as a way of sorting out the problems of capitalism, which is unable to answer the problems of poverty. And this is in the 5th largest economy in the world. When I look at that, I think, hang on, they're getting it wrong. Then I realise, of course, that virtually all of my fellows are absolutely obsessed with how bad it is for the poor to live today. And I'm saying, do I join that, or do I step back and say, so people come to me and say, will you get involved in this? And I say, no, no, no. I'm here to dismantle poverty. I want to stop Johnny, who's 3, who's about to fail at school, who is going to end up leaving school without any degrees, any levels, or anything like that, becoming a big issue vendor in 20 years' time. So I'm there to say, you look after today. I really believe that the big issue facing us is how do we dismantle poverty? When you look at government departments, when you look at the fact, my own favourite department, the prison department, I was educated by the prisons. Yeah. I went to school, I went to a good Catholic school, God bless them. By the end of it, I knew, you know, the shoe sizes of Jesus, of the saints, but I didn't know where the world was. So when I learnt to read and write in a boys' prison, that's what reform was. So if we are going to change poverty, we've got to stop the 30% of people who fail at school becoming 80% of the prison population, becoming the long-term unemployed, becoming the people. So we've got to really sort out the kids at the school, but we've got to make prisons work. And when you say that, people go, oh, all the Liberals recoil. I say, look, it was my last chance. It was my university.
Yeah. Look at the state of prisons now.
There's a lot of Liberals in the political system, in the media. They'll always cry over the state of the NHS or state of social care or even homelessness, for that matter. There's a wealth of people concerned with that. There doesn't seem to be, on the left, as you used to be, and I still am, any believable strategy for generating wealth, for putting people to work productively. I always say, under socialism, if I was running it, there would be nobody out of work. I mean, the work would be brought to you if you couldn't get out of your house, because everybody needs to work, and not just for purposes of productivity. In other words, what I'm saying is, isn't part of this problem liberalism and liberals themselves?
You see, what I think the left has really lost, I consider myself still of the left, but I describe myself as a Catholic Marxist because I want to separate myself from any kind of social democracy type thing. But what I find is that what is really lacking is a passion to turn people's lives around. So when I, for instance, talk about why don't we turn social security into social opportunity, what people say, oh yeah, but people should be allowed to be who they are. I said, no, what you're doing is if you live in poverty, you live nowhere near democracy. My mother, London, an Irish lady, came over here having all these children, never participated in democracy, never had any time because she was swallowed up with a night job cleaning in Baker Street and all sorts of stuff like that. She never went anywhere. So what we've got to do is we have to come up on the left, on the centre, wherever you want to call it, we have to come up with a grand plan. Now, I agree with Napoleon. Napoleon said the most useless thing on earth is a battle plan, but you're lost without it. And I believe that we need to be grand planning. We need to be reinvigorating the original welfare state. You know, the original welfare state, and I remember I was 2 when I was 5, when I went to school, it was started. I went to school, and the first thing they did was exercises, pills. Working classes would be as healthy as the middle classes. And 50 years later, 60 years later, we have a situation where we spend half of 1% of the National Health Service on prevention when we used to spend 20%. Everything's gone Versi, and I believe very strongly we need to go back and reinvent what the welfare state was, because it was the most profound intervention in the lives of ordinary people.
You are a very unordinary man and a very unordinary Lord, and it's been a pleasure talking to you on the Sputnik today.
Coming up next, the opposition wins in Ghana and will take power without a shot being fired. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Sputnik. Ghana, at the time of independence from Britain, was led by one of the greatest of all African leaders, Kwame Nkrumah. Since then, it's been frankly downhill, at least in my opinion. Although I did have a soft spot for the half-a-Scotsman, Jerry Rawlings.
But you've got to hand it to Ghana. They do generally have free and fair elections, and nobody has to fight their way into power.
And the same has just happened last week as the opposition leader, Nana Akufo-Addo, takes on the premiership. Joining us now to discuss what it all means is Jonathan Offei-Ansah, founder and publisher of Africa Briefing. Jonathan, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
First of all, tell me, how does Ghana manage to have peaceful, relatively fair elections, and the opposition takes on the power and the power leaves without a fight? What's so different about Ghana with, say, Ivory Coast next door?
Ghana, historically, has been a trailblazer, in many spheres of life, like politics, economy, and so on and so forth. Okay, I mean, Ghana was the first to gain independence in sub-Saharan Africa. You mentioned Nkrumah, right? And fast forward to the mid-80s, I think Ghana was among the first to embrace IMF structural economic reforms, right, which actually helped to improve the economy up to a point. And again, generally, Ghanaians, there have been so many coups, in Ghana's political history. And Ghanaians got fed up. I mean, what actually turned the tide was when Rawlings staged a coup in 1979 and executed some former army generals and heads of state by firing squad. And again, some businessmen were arrested, whipped publicly, humiliated publicly. And in those days, if you had more than 50,000 cedis, the Ghana currency, in your account, you had to come and account for. And if you couldn't account properly for that money in your account,
that sounds quite fair to me.
Yeah, well, but you see, so all this, cumulatively, turned Ghanaians against the idea of a coup d'etat. Ghanaians got fed up of coup d'etats. So they rather, and again, I like to think that the Ghanaian electorate or the Ghanaian public, is a bit politically, it's becoming a bit politically more mature and a bit sophisticated. Okay, so we prefer to change our governments through the ballot box instead of some soldier, disgruntled soldier, getting up from barracks, taking arms, and overthrowing a popular government.
Now, you mentioned the IMF. Ghana was, for a time at least, kind of poster boy for IMF structural reform. I must tell you, when I hear the words IMF structural reform, I run for the hills. Yeah. Because whilst on the theoretical level that might improve some features of the economy, it generally means mass poverty for the working people and the already poor.
Well, poor what comes what, yeah?
Yeah.
So how has, or did they, Ghana escape that fate for the masses?
Well, after a while, the economy improved. We went through those reforms, economic reforms from 1983 to, I think, the mid to late 90s, right? And thankfully, commodity prices shot up. And again, the structural adjustment, took effect. Okay, so we were weaned off, those economic IMF-imposed economic policies. And when Kufuor came to power in 2000, he declared Ghana HIPIC. About 90% of Ghana's debts, were written off. Okay, and a lot of money started flowing in. And Kufuor was pro-business. So he attracted a lot of goodwill. Okay, so that actually helped improve the plight of the ordinary Ghanaian. Poverty was reduced from, I think 40 thereabout percent to under 30%. Okay, and that trend is ongoing now.
Continuing. So why did the opposition win this election? What were their main criticisms of the then government?
Of this incumbent outgoing government, you mean?
Yes, the outgoing government. Why were they defeated?
Okay, number one, this outgoing government actually undertook a lot of infrastructure, big-ticket infrastructure programs. Built roads, hospitals, schools, so on and so forth. They must be given credit for that. But there is this perception of corruption, and corruption with impunity, right? So that actually, I was in Ghana August, September, and just about anybody I spoke to was crying, corruption, corruption, corruption. And the situation wasn't helped with the protracted energy crisis that affected individuals, businesses. Some businesses had to close, leading to retrenchment, therefore high unemployment. Their situation wasn't helped when the late president Atta Mills, there were agitation, a lot of strikes by the public, nurses, doctors, teachers, and so on and so forth, right? So, the government had to adjust the public service salary structure. So, wage increases were awarded across the board, okay? So that shot up, ballooned the government budget, recurrent budget balloon, so much so that it was spending about 65% of the budget on wages and salaries. Can you do the maths? Okay, now, and the situation was exacerbated by falling prices for Ghana's commodity exports, cocoa, gold, and lately oil. So it couldn't help. So the government had to resort to borrowing, external borrowing. So right now, the debt stands at about 67% of Ghana's GDP.
Yeah.
Now, what's happened to my old comrade, Jerry Rawlings? Is he out of politics altogether? His family appear to be on different sides in the elections. What's that all about?
Well, your old mate Rawlings, everybody knows him to be I'll use the word advisedly, but rabidly, against, corruption. And he believed, or still believes, that this current government, this outgoing government, was full of corrupt officials. And he was also frustrated, to put it mildly, by the outgoing president, John Mahama's seemingly powerless, right, to do anything, about the corruption in government and in business, okay? And again, I believe there was also some bad blood between the former First Lady, Nana Akufo-Addo, Mrs. Rawlings, right? So much so that Mrs. Rawlings had to form her own party and contest. But I believe, ostensibly, to water down John Mahama and NDC's votes. But funny enough, ironically...
And was that the first time she ran then, or not?
Yes, the first time, yes. And ironically, their first daughter, Dr. Ezadeto Rawlings, right, has just been elected...
As an MP?
As an MP, the elections last week, okay, on the ticket of the of the outgoing party, NDC.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is odd. Do they have serious political ambitions? Is there a possibility of the Rawlings family in one form or another coming back to power in Ghana?
What I hear from the grapevine, and I have some very good sources actually in the country. Yeah, that there are plans for one prominent NDC guy whose name I wouldn't mention, right, to become the leader of the party and choose Rawlings' daughter, Dr. Ezadeto Rawlings, as his running mate. So that's the plan, yeah. That's the information I gather.
I mean, without knowing any more about it, I wish them very well indeed. The state of Ghana under the incoming government, how much change?
Look, the people are clamoring for change. We had people clamoring for change in America, elsewhere. I think it's become the buzzword, in global politics now. Okay, they expect jobs, and this incoming president has made some promises. One dam for every village, one factory for every district, $1 million for every district constituency, 75 constituencies in Ghana. So we're talking about giving $1 million to every constituency. We're talking about $275 million. Yeah. Where is that money going to come from? They are banking, the incoming government are banking on improved commodity prices, gold, oil, and cocoa, right? And again, there's one oil project that is coming on stream. I think it's a $7.1 billion oil project that is coming on stream. It is being managed by Italy's Eni, right? That should come on stream early next year. And there's a gas project that's also come on stream in 2018. Okay, so the incoming government is banking
economy
on these revenue streams, to provide these things.
Gold, cocoa, and oil. Here's my prediction. The price will rise on all three of those over the next 5 years.
Let's also, if it does, if the prices rise, all the best for Ghana.
All the best for Ghana. Jonathan, thanks very much for joining us on the Sputnik. And now it's your turn to tell us what you think through the portals of social media. What's rattling, Gayatri?
So the big issue has sold over 250 million copies, which is amazing, amazing. Matt Turner says, a newspaper that helps those who are vulnerable and marginalized while our broadsheets pretend they don't exist. And Agatokles says, John Bird shows that media can be a tool for the great good as well as evil. An inspiration he is.
He is the finest Catholic I know, apart from Pope Francis himself.
Well, that's all the tweets that we have for today.
Which alas means that's the end of the show.
But you can stay in touch with us on social media through Twitter, RT_Sputnik, or on Facebook, Sputnik on Russia Today. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.